Welcome to episode 113 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about some standouts between Chicago and Colorado from last night's matchup. And Chicago actually ended up taking that game, and Colorado, they looked like they were pulling in and closing in on a comeback. But at the tail end of the game, that's when Chicago was really able to separate themselves. They've had some games where they've come close to winning them, and then they just can't close it out at the end. But this is a game where they're able to close it out finally, and they showed really good and really positive play overall offensively. And so we'll start with them and some standouts on their side. And Ryan Donato's been on the hot streak recently, and he's been playing really well. 2 goals and an assist for 3 points and 4 shots on goal. So he's been a guy that's really stood out offensively, and he's been a guy that's been very notable on the forecheck and being able to create turnovers and being able to be active in that sense. And at the same time, he's been a very good offensive contributor using his speed and his play off the rush to be able to create offense and how he can not only score goals and use his shot, but at the same time be able to generate volume in terms of his playmaking as well. And Jason Dickinson's a guy that's been standing out the last few games now, and he had a slow start to the season, but now he's really heating up a little bit more. And offensively, not necessarily a guy that's super relied upon per se. Yes, he had a really good season last year and a bounce back season for himself last year, but at the same time, he's a guy that's more of a middle six, bottom nine, or bottom six type guy in this team who can play a little bit anywhere. And he's a guy that can play both sides of the puck as well. He can play a shutdown game, but he can also play an offensive role when necessary. And he had 2 assists yesterday. He looked really good. He was similar to Donato in the sense of how he's able to create stuff with his speed, how he's able to generate with his speed, and how he can generate lots of playmaking volume with his speed as well. And he looked good. Philip Kurashev and Ilya Mikheyev looked really good this game. Two guys that have been off to slow starts as well, but Kurashev's a guy who's been up and down the top nine. He's been playing center. He's been playing wing. There hasn't been a true fit for him anywhere this season yet, but keeping him on a line with Connor Bedard seems to do wonders for him. And he seems to be more consistent when he's playing with Bedard and playing on his wing. And he doesn't necessarily look like a true fit at center. He looks like a more natural fit on wing, and he can create speed through the wings. He's really good along the perimeter, controlling the walls, that type of thing. So he's a good complementary player for a guy like Bedard in terms of the ozone play. Ilya Mikheyev is a guy who he's more straight line speed reliant. He's more north south in terms of his skill set and how he plays and how he's able to generate offense. He's not a flashy east west guy. He's not a flashy playmaking guy moving laterally, but at the same time, he can create speed and he's very efficient when using his speed. And that's his biggest asset is when he can barrel down on defenders off the rush with his speed, and he looked really good. Lucas Reichel has been continuing his hot start to the season. He looks like a guy that's playing like a top six center slash winger. He's more of a winger in my eyes with the way he controls pace on the wings and on the dot lane area inside the neutral zone, the ozone. He looks more like a winger in that sense, but at the same time, he can play that center role when needed and he can fit that role when needed. But it's more about the reliability aspect with him at center. I would say he's more reliable as a winger right now, but he looked really good yet last night in terms of his ability to create offense and how he was creating offense in a lot of different ways. And he looked very efficient with his attack. And that was really good to see out of him and how he can continue to not only use his speed, but also his skill and flair to be a consistent contributor in the lineup. Then we'll get to one more. And outside of Connor Bedard, we'll talk about Alex Vlasic. I thought Alex Vlasic looked really good again this game and playing, still getting power play reps, still getting a lot of more reps at 5-on-5 play and being able to play consistently as a top four defenseman. And last year he was up and down the top six to start the season, but this year he's up and down the top four. He's not even in the bottom six type role. And he's a guy who's very much, and he looks more engaged offensively and in transition this season thus far. And he looked really good yesterday in doing that. And how he's able to create offense, how he can create in transition, how efficient he is creating off the rush with his speed and his skating and his mobility, and how he can create in a variety of ways as well. And then we'll get to Colorado here. And Nathan McKinnon looked really good this game. A guy who brings blazing speed. His goal in the first period was notable because he scored on the power play, and it was the start of 5-on-3, and he scored right away on the 5-on-3. He just went past Seth Jones so effortlessly with his speed off the rush, and he's able to beat him one on one and then drive and route to the net and score. And he's very efficient at being able to use his speed. That's his biggest asset to his game is how he can create that and the powerful strides that he has to be able to create separation in his skating and his puck skills as well. Kale McCarr, very similar in that sense with how he controls play, how dominant he is as a puck carrier, how dominant he is as an overall playmaker, and a guy that plays the puck really well. And he plays very engaged offensively all the time. And he's a guy that is always noticeable when he has the puck on his stick, and he's like Nathan McKinnon, but just a back end version of Nathan McKinnon. So very similar players in that sense. And then we'll get to a couple more. We'll get to Casey Middlestat, who's looked really good to start the season. I've really liked his game, especially his playmaking and the natural fit behind McKinnon as a second line center. And after him being traded by Buffalo, he's really fit in well with Colorado thus far. He looks like a guy that fits their style really well, and he plays really all over the board offensively. He's very reliable as a playmaker, very reliable as a puck transporter, very reliable as a pass first player, and he makes his line mates better. He's not the fastest of guys on this team, but at the same time, he still plays with speed and he plays with really agile ability in his footwork and his edge work. And that's just really noticeable is how he can cut through and slice through defenders in one-on-one sequences, but also on entry sequences and also in the neutral zone to be able to cut through forecheck layers. So he's a guy that's very reliable with his feet and his footwork and how he can use that to change the angle or open a passing lane, open a shot lane, whatever it may be. He's really adaptable and agile with his skating. And then finally, Ivan actually was one of the biggest standouts for me for Colorado. I noticed him a lot with the speed, and it's been a common theme throughout saying this throughout this podcast thus far. But with Ivan, he's a guy that brings a lot of speed. He brings some skill, like slightly above average skill, but the speed, the checking ability, the ability to play a bottom six role when necessary, but also play a little higher up in the lineup. In Colorado, all their bottom sixers have skill. That's the notable part about them is they have lateral playmaking elements in their game. They have skill in their game. It's not just they check and compete, and that's their only attribute that they have. They actually have skill inside their bottom six. So this gives Colorado matchup favors sometimes because they're able to create offense sometimes as low as their third and fourth lines. And some teams and other teams in the league don't necessarily have that advantage. So with their third and fourth lines, it's really a weapon for Colorado because they have skill players, but also checkers, and they have a ton of speed. So those combined elements make for a really big threat when teams are trying to challenge that as well.